Greetings, we are in Junior English, and today our objective is to prepare for the writing assessment number 15, which is coming next week on Wednesday, namely page 1175 with your 5 pieces of external validation. Now, to do that, first of all, we've got to make sure we have read the Cesar Chavez passage. He showed us the way, Martin Luther King Jr., he showed us the way. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to listen and read the text starting on page 1173. Then we're going to do some outlining to prepare us for this paper. Let me help you, though, before you even start with this reading. This paper asks the following of you. You have to make a decision. You have to form an opinion about the idea of nonviolent resistance. You're going to have 3 texts that you'll be working from. You'll be working from the Malcolm X text and the MLK text that we were looking at yesterday, stride towards freedom and right and necessary to protect. And then this Chavez text as well. Taken collectively, those 3, you have to form an opinion about nonviolent resistance. Do you think it works? Do you think it doesn't work? Why not? Now the key is in your paper, you have to cite from all 3 for internal validation, all 3 of those different texts. Do you got me? So you got to cite from all 3. You also have to do research and quote 5 times from pieces of external validation. You'll have a reference page with your MLA style book. Let's go ahead now. We are on page 1173. Let's listen to the Chavez reading. Follow along closely. And then we'll have some final comments to make.
Martin Luther King Jr. He showed us the way. Cesar Chavez. You are about to read Martin Luther King Jr. He showed us the way. An essay by labor activist Cesar Chavez in memory of the civil rights leader. As you read, consider how Chavez's work was similar to King's. In honoring Martin Luther King Jr.'s memory, we also acknowledge nonviolence as a truly powerful weapon to achieve equality and liberation. In fact, the only weapon that Christians who struggle for social change can claim as their own. Dr. King's entire life was an example of power that nonviolence brings to bear in the real world. It is an example that inspired much of the philosophy and strategy of the farm workers movement. This observance of Dr. King's death gives us the best possible opportunity to recall the principles with which our struggle has grown and matured. Our conviction is that human life is a very special possession given by God to man, and that no one has the right to take it for any reason or for any cause, however just it may be. We are also convinced that nonviolence is more powerful than violence. Nonviolence supports you if you have a just and moral cause. Nonviolence provides the opportunity to stay on the offensive, and that is of crucial importance to win any contest. If we resort to violence, then one of 2 things will happen. Either the violence will be escalated, and there will be many injuries and perhaps deaths on both sides, or there will be total demoralization of the workers. Nonviolence has exactly the opposite effect. If, for every violent act committed against us, we respond with nonviolence, we attract people's support. We can gather the support of millions who have a conscience and would rather see a nonviolent resolution to problems. We are convinced that when people are faced with a direct appeal from the poor, struggling nonviolently against great odds, they will react positively. The American people and people everywhere still yearn for justice. It is to that yearning that we appeal. But if we are committed to nonviolence only as a strategy or tactic, then if it fails, our only alternative is to turn to violence. So we must balance the strategy with a clear understanding of what we are doing. However important the struggle is, and however much misery, poverty, and exploitation exist, we know that it cannot be more important than one human life. We work on the theory that men and women who are truly concerned about people are nonviolent by nature. These people become violent when the deep concern they have for people is frustrated, and when they are faced with seemingly insurmountable odds. We advocate militant nonviolence as our means of achieving justice for our people, but we are not blind to the feelings of frustration, impatience, and anger which seethe inside every farm worker. The burdens of generations of poverty and powerlessness lie heavy in the fields of America. If we fail, there are those who will see violence as the shortcut to change. It is precisely to overcome these frustrations that we have involved masses of people in their own struggle throughout the movement. Freedom is best experienced through participation and self-determination, and free men and women instinctively prefer democratic change to any other means. Thus, demonstrations and marches, strikes and boycotts are not only weapons against the growers, but our way of avoiding the senseless violence that brings no honor to any class or community. The boycott, as Gandhi taught, is the most nearly perfect instrument of nonviolent change, allowing masses of people to participate actively in a cause. When victory comes through violence, it is a victory with strings attached. If we beat the growers at the expense of violence, victory would come at the expense of injury and perhaps death. Such a thing would have a tremendous impact on us. We would lose regard for human beings. Then the struggle would become a mechanical thing. When you lose your sense of life and justice, you lose your strength. The greater the oppression, the more leverage nonviolence holds. Violence does not work in the long run, and if it is temporarily successful, it replaces one violent form of power with another just as violent. People suffer from violence. Examine history. Who gets killed in the case of violent revolution? The poor, the workers. The people of the land are the ones who give their bodies and don't really gain that much for it. We believe it is too big a price to pay for not getting anything. Those who espouse violence exploit people. To call men to arms with many promises, to ask them to give up their lives for a cause and then not produce for them afterwards, is the most vicious type of oppression. We know that most likely we are not going to do anything else the rest of our lives except build our union. For us, there is nowhere else to go. Although we would like to see victory come soon, we are willing to wait. In this sense, time is our ally. We learned many years ago that the rich may have money, but the poor have time. It has been our experience that few men or women ever have the opportunity to know the true satisfaction that comes with giving one's life totally in the non-violent struggle for justice. Martin Luther King Jr. was one of these unique servants, and from him we learned many of the lessons that have guided us. For these lessons and for his sacrifice for the poor and oppressed, Dr. King's memory will be cherished in the hearts of the farm workers forever.
All right, now what we want to do real quickly is we want to pay attention to the questions and the guide that is provided for us on page 1175. Your writing prompt is there. What is your opinion of nonviolent resistance as a weapon of social change? State your position and support it with reasons and evidence, what we call points of validation, from the three selections you've just read. Again, the Malcolm X, the MLK, and then the Chavez text. Okay. If you wish, with examples from history or your own experience, of course, for sure you're going to be using examples from history, and that is your external validation. Do you got me? So the easy way to do this is to start with the three questions up at the top on page 1175 and answer those. Then the four questions down below, including your little graph there. By the time you finish doing that work, you should be able to have a pretty good idea of your own opinion about the ways in which nonviolent resistance has worked. Of course, there's a number of examples in your research, you'll find this, of the ways in which nonviolent resistance has led to some positive outcomes. All right? So there you go, an introduction to the assignment and the ways in which we're going to write our paper.